No, the special.
Is Basecamp all remote?
Industry. So
They have an
just
office
put
in
stuff into the, like,
Chicago, but I think
okay, so like
they're remote, and
servers,
they meet.
databases,
They have to meet.
okay.
Things.
Supervisors, all that stuff got built into language, because it was like, well, like, we need this. We need distribution, redundancy, we're not just like learning language, we don't.
I wouldn't want to go to Chicago.
It's cold, like, yeah, like, that stuff, that's everything you have to learn. And so,
Chicago's cold.
Yeah, for me, I don't have any background in that.
So my wife, I gave her the rig up socks you got,
With the language and the
and the next day she had
yeah, that's a big.
given them away.
What?
I was like that too, because I was like, I just gave you something. She belongs to like this internet thing where people try not to buy new stuff.
Okay.
So the whole purpose is, if you want to, it's kind of like I have something that I want to give away, does anyone want it? And then someone says, you know, like, yes, I want it, and you're just like, here, it'll be at my front door,
Okay.
come get it. A few rig up employees actually contacted her, she's like, didn't know about, they could get socks.
Yeah.
And I told her, they work at rig up, they can get socks.
They want you.
That's so funny.
So, but why did she give away the socks?
I think because they were long socks and she typically wears short socks.
Every problem is ET.
But were they for you?
I mean, it's for men or women, they're unisex socks.
No, but, so you didn't bring them for you, you gave it to her.
I gave it to her because they're
Okay.
colorful and that would be more her style. And then the next day she'd already given them away. I was like, oh, thanks for asking.
She moves quick.
She does.
Have you guys heard of Nest.js?
Next.js.
Nest, N-E-S-T. Yeah. We just started using it at work and yeah, I spent some time over the weekend going through a course on how it works now, all the pieces come together. It's like, it's kind of Rails, like in that it does a lot of things that seem magical. Just because it does things for you. So, I know, it's interesting, like all the pieces of it. It's certainly not like Rails, but it's similar.
What's the novelty about it versus other?
What is it trying to solve?
So it handles a lot.
Yeah, I did.
It's, well, the big thing it provides is a version of control component called a module. So it handles all the dependency injection for you when you register things with the module and let it know what is injectable and what are the types that it will provide to other classes within the module. And then it handles a lot of other things through decorators, which are like higher order functions in, really in TypeScript. It's still a proposed addition to JavaScript, so it's like, I don't know, ES8 or whatever the next version is. But it's kind of interesting the way it's able to do all these things. I'm still not sure where the magic lives. Like when I was originally learning Rails, it was like, how does all this stuff come together? It just kind of works. I'll figure it out later.
I was looking at that in sales. But, you know, I didn't think like anybody would actually be using that stuff anytime soon.
That was one of those talks, right?
I've heard of sales.
Yeah, it's like NBC.
Some of mine I wasn't here,
But why did you guys decide to use
but I need
Nest?
to, see that.
How did that technical decision
I
get
mean, the
made?
main problem is that Ruby doesn't.
So
I didn't talk
a
about
lot
that
of,
part in the talk, I just talked about.
A lot of people at the office have more JavaScript experience than Rails.
How does tail
and Ruby.
work? Ruby doesn't.
And they're looking to basically rebuild our monolith platform in a more distributed setup. So this was the technology that they more or less standardized around. Yeah.
Actually, it's the worst thing I feel like companies are doing these days.
Moving away from Rails?
Moving away from
Tell,
monoliths.
like, you can tell Ruby on Buddha to
Not necessarily a monolith. I think there are.
It depends, you can pick things apart.
We can pick things, and I think it
think it
depends
really
on,
needs to be
on the scenario, but doing it just because we just hired a bunch of JavaScript developers and JavaScript developers don't want to learn anything else.
That's what I just, yeah. I mean, if you hire a bunch of JavaScript developers, you get a JavaScript solution. Same if you hire a Ruby developer, you get Ruby solution.
But not necessarily, because I think Ruby developers will also use JavaScript and will use other things to do the right tool for the right job.
I don't think Java opportunities, so.
Like some of my friends, no Java. I met another security guard last night who's a programmer during the day, which is completely random.
Maybe they do.
He's using Java. And I was like, oh man, the Java's like, looking like there's something I learned. It's not that opposed offers to it, it's just I don't have to learn that just perfect. I know I'm gonna have to learn something else eventually anyway.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know if we should double down on Ruby. Ruby Java.
I've been hearing good things about Kotlin. Compiles to the JVM. So, I mean, the JVM's used in so many things these days that at some point you'll probably use something that runs on it.
How many people are using
So,
Kotlin is
I
like.
think we're gonna start. Sorry to interrupt your discussion. It's 7:05. You're here for Austin RB, you're in the right place. Thank you all for showing up. I know it's probably been confusing a little bit with South by being canceled and everything at Capital Factory being canceled. So I hope we didn't lose anybody based off like miscommunication or anything like that. This is a necessary slide. I have to put that up. This is also a necessary slide. I have to watch. Yeah, sure.
Welcome to Capital Factory. We are glad you could join us here at the center of gravity for entrepreneurship in Texas.
We bring together entrepreneurs, developers, and designers across Texas for meetups, classes, co-working, mentorship, events, and our accelerator program. At Capital Factory's core, we're all about people and making lasting connections.
We meet the best entrepreneurs in Texas and introduce them to their first investors, employees, mentors, and customers.
We hope that you'll join us again and consider becoming a part of our community.
For more information on becoming a member, head over to join.capitalfactory.com. Thank you.
All right. A few housekeeping items. Street parking Mondays and Tuesdays is free after 6 p.m. But if you parked in the building, there's a validation, so ask the front desk for a validation card. Also, thank you to our sponsors, Capital Factory, sponsor for the location. People Admin, a Power School company, sponsored the tacos. Anything you'd like to say?
Sure. People Admin is a Power School company. Power School is the largest student information system company in the world, and where Power School focuses on the K through 12 market in education. It's kindergarten through 12th grade. People Admin focuses on the higher ed space. I don't know if they're hiring right now. I think they're doing budgeting processes right now, but they might be hiring pretty soon.
Next up is, Rigo. Like to say something?
Sure. RigUp is a startup here in Austin. We make software for the energy industry, so solar, gas, oil, wind. We are moving away, unfortunately, from a Ruby on Rails monolith, although it was not architected so great in the beginning, and moving towards an SJS. We are hiring, but it is at the senior level and above. Excuse me. We operate every day following our North Star of empowering the men and women who power the world by providing economic opportunity.
Cool. Another sponsor is Bear Giraffe, which is my company, but I'll skip talking about it. If you'd like to become a sponsor, or your company would like to become a sponsor, we do have these 3 tiers, and you can go to opencollective.com/AustinOnRails. I know this is Austin RB, but we use the same place to sponsor both. And you actually, when you sponsor, you're actually sponsoring both the meetups. And so it's just divided by whether you want to sponsor for the whole year, a quarter, or one, what's it called? One meetup, 1 month. Code of conduct, if you go to the meetup page, meetup.com/AustinRV/pages/this random number/code of conduct, that's where you'll find it. There's an easy link on the homepage of the meetup group. The gist of it is please be nice to everybody, be welcoming. If for any reason you feel like this was not a good experience for you, please come see the organizers, which is myself, Justin, Nathan. And if you want to complain about me, you can complain to them. If you want to complain about them, you can complain to me, vice versa. Quick links, austinrb.org will redirect you directly to the meetup page, so if you don't want to try to look for it or you think that's the easiest way to do it. We are on Slack under the Refresh Austin umbrella, so it's refreshaustin.slack.com. If that link doesn't work, just tweet at us and we'll invite you if you send us your email.
Thanks.
All right, so coming up later this year, maybe, question mark, if we're still alive, May 5th to May 7th is RailsConf in Portland. So be on the lookout to see if the actual conference is still gonna be held or not. But hopefully, RubyConf will still be around. We'll figure this thing out by November, fingers crossed, because it's going to be very close in Houston. So that's a short drive, and maybe a bunch of us can carpool there. Anyone else has any announcements, events, Ruby things, anything you'd like to share? Going once? Going once?
Isn't Ruby conference in Houston this year?
Yes.
A few months off. I think it's worth mentioning a little bit just because it's so close to us.
Yeah, that's what I just did.
Oh. Huh?
That's what this was. Sorry, this was.
Portland?
RubyConf.
I didn't even see that.
Yeah, that's cool. So that's in November 17th to 9th. Any other announcements? Nope. Yeah.
The RubyConf is in Houston this month.
Yes, I should mention that.
Moving on. Who is here for the first time? Cool. Welcome. Who's been here before but hasn't been here in a long time? All right, welcome. So let's quickly do your name, company, and if your company is hiring or if you are looking, and different icebreaker this time around. I want to just gauge the room and see if people here will still like to have this meetup continue regardless of what happens with the corona pandemic thing. If you're not aware, there's a pandemic happening. My 401k realized it today. So my name is Yusuf. I am in between jobs. So I'm not hiring, technically not looking anymore, I guess. We'll see. I mean, yeah, sure. There are offers. I haven't accepted anything yet, but unless there's somebody else another company that comes along, then maybe next meetup I'll have a job. My icebreaker is I don't care. I've had flu A and flu B back to back this year between December and January and February. So bring it on, Corona. Although I do have a 6-month-old, so I have to be. Although no, they said that babies are safe, so should be fine. So that's me. We'll go this way.
My name's Justin. I work at People Admin. I'm open to looking. Icebreaker. I probably keep coming unless I get it. The most concern I have is I have a trip to Italy in June, so I'm hoping it dies down, but I have trip insurance, so I'm just watching.
I think it's on lockdown now, right?
Huh?
The whole country's on lockdown.
Yes.
It is, but it is 3 months away.
And how are
Well,
you
look, by the time
traveling?
we're gonna have it.
Huh?
How are you traveling there?
By plane,
And then what?
in cruise.
Very good question.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm a software engineering manager at RigUp. We are hiring, like I said before, at the senior level and up. I'm gonna keep coming until I get sick, then I'll quarantine myself and be a big baby at home, and my wife will have to deal with me, and hopefully she'll live if I don't.
Hey, I'm Justin. I just finished an internship at Dark Owl, and I'm looking. And I'm gonna keep coming, even if, you know, Corona gets in the same time. It's not gonna stop me.
All right.
Oh, I'm Hal Fulton. We work remotely for Simplify, which is in Fort Worth. They probably are hiring if you want to move to Fort Worth. I will try to be here more often, you know, regardless of COVID-19 or 20 or 21 or whatever.
All right.
As long as I'm alive and not spreading it.
Cool.
Hey, I'm Mike. I am a Rails developer. I work at a small company based in Phoenix, and we're not hiring. I'm not looking, and yeah, I will still keep coming so long as Capital Factory's open. I don't have the COVID-19.
Cool.
Mark, I am a software engineer for a company called Doxity. We are hiring. They are like 80% remote, so if you're into remote work, then that's probably good. And I'm not looking currently, and I will definitely keep coming unless I get sick.
I'm Leslie. I'm a student in the Flatiron Boot Camp on the online one. I'm not looking yet. I'm going to have to start looking soon, though, because I keep saying I'm not looking yet. And I'm going to lose credibility if I never look. But yes, unless I have to quarantine myself, I will probably keep coming.
Cool.
My name's Adam. I do a couple things. I run a software consulting company called Groundwork Software, which is focused on mentoring new software developers. And I'm currently working with a company called Stronghold Resource Partners, which is based in Dallas and Austin. Might be hiring, but not certain just yet. Not looking, and I don't actually technically live in Texas, but I suppose I'll keep coming as long as I'm physically here.
Cool.
Where do you live?
New York.
I think that's an upstate for coronavirus.
Well, it's not my fault because I'm not there.
Yeah, you're probably better off here for the time being.
I'm Grant. I actually work with Adam at Stronghold Resource Partners. And I'll keep coming, and I'll just like stay 7 feet away from everyone else.
I'm Andy. I am right now a software engineering intern at RigUp. I am looking for the next thing, because that internship will eventually end. And so I will also keep coming, depending on how much worse it gets, but yeah.
My name is Nathan. I work at Procore. I'm not currently looking, and we are hiring, but fairly senior and up. So for Icebreaker, I'll be here, and when you guys tell me to bring masks and gloves, I will make sure they're here so everybody else can come.
All right, cool. Jason, just basically name, company you work at, if you're hiring or you're looking for a job, and then just a poll to see if people will keep coming regardless of.
Oh yeah, I haven't been. I used to come to these quite often. I haven't been in a long time. Kids, life, situational, expectations, whatever you want to call it. But Jason Allen, I recently switched companies. I'm now in Omni, actually, at 13th floor at Netspin. It's a Java stack. It's an old. It's like 20 plus years old. They were acquired a couple of years ago and then acquired again more recently, like a year ago. All good things are happening, I think. The requirements just they're all very much complementary. So it's not like we require you to take you out. It's like we require you to take you on. So pretty cool.
How was the traffic on the way here?
Sorry?
How was the traffic on the way here?
Man, I gotta tell you, so the company that I used to work for was on 9th and Congress in the Guarantee Bank building. And so my wife and I, when we purchased our home, my wife's a physical therapist. She works at the Children's Hospital on 51st and Berkman. So we bought our home because it's like a mile and a half there, and then my job was like 2 miles, right? So traffic was awesome for us, both of us. And then, so I was with our company, my previous company, and then it moved to, so it was a 10-minute bicycle ride downtown. Then our company moved way out west to 360 and BKs. 31 stop signs, 45 minutes in a car, had to buy a car, no longer a bicycle, sold my bicycle. Anyway, moved on from that company back downtown, so now it's like, I mean, I could probably run here as quick as I could drive a car here, so I'm super excited to be back downtown. I love downtown, I love the vibe, I love the scene.
Because you work on the 13th floor, right?
I do work on the 13th floor.
Yeah, that's what the question is.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't, what was the actual question?
I think he was joking, how far was it from here?
Oh, no, I came from home. I came back, I went home, I mean, I took a shower, you know, I got no, yeah, I'm sorry, totally confused the question, but yeah, it's good. Hiring, looking, I don't know, I have no idea, I've not been there very long. I really like the people, like, I will or will not keep coming. These are every first Monday of the month.
Yeah. Second Monday of the month.
I'll keep coming. I could care less about virus. I don't know. I get allergies a lot, constantly sick from the allergies.
It's only 50% death rate.
I mean, at this point in my life, yeah, I really don't care. So maybe get some insurance money out of it. I don't know. Best I could hope for, but yeah, glad to be here. Thanks, Jason.
Hey guys, I'm Constantine. I work for a company called MyVest. We're in the fintech space, Java and Node.js. Not hiring right now. I'm not looking. I'll probably keep coming unless the city says otherwise. I don't think big deal. But
Okay.
we'll see how it turns out.
My name is Mike. I run a company called FinServe Marketing, but I'm coming here because I'm in the process of building an app that I hope will turn into a viable startup called From Home. It's for people who are working from home. I actually work from home, so it's really kind of interesting. This COVID-19 thing is kind of accelerating awareness of the benefits of working from home for lots of folks. I'm here because I want to meet some smart people. Who knows? Maybe I find somebody who would be a co-founder or something at some point in time. But I'm looking to learn from everybody. I've built everything so far myself, from watching tutorials online and kind of coming up to speed. As far as the COVID-19 thing comes, I'm hosting an event that was originally supposed to be coinciding with South by this Friday, and it's still going on. I surveyed our attendees, and 71% of them said they're still going to come, so we're going to have a couple hundred people there.
Where is it?
At Kilar. It's for the fintech kind of ecosystem, so you should come.
Sure, yeah.
Absolutely. Lots of good folks there, lots of fintech startups and people from the industry, angels and VCs tend to attend, so it's a really good time.
What is the name for it?
What's that?
What is the name of the event?
It's named SoFine, or like social financial, so get together, drink some beer, eat some tacos, and hang out with a lot of smart people, watch some startup pitches, and yeah.
Is it on Eventbrite or where is it?
It's on Eventbrite, yeah. So this, and on Facebook now, there's a lot of people who usually do events during South by, who are still trying to keep those events going on. So there's a lot of that type of stuff. There's a place called, a group called Rally Austin that's really putting, so whatever you're interested in, whatever your industry is, go check it out.
So you think that like South by is still going to proceed?
No, I think there's a lot of people who are locals who
they're unofficial events, but they're still putting them on because it's like, look, I mean, I've been planning this thing for months and
Yep.
people want to go. So, if you're sick, stay home. Come.
Makes sense?
Wash your hands, damn it. You know?
Hi, I'm Ann. I'm a rail staff at a company based in Ohio called Cover My Nets. We are hired. I am not looking. And as far as viruses go, not really quite sure how this is different than other flus. I read all the stats, I look at stuff, so. I mean, do we track other flus this closely? I don't know. I'll be here. Constantine, you're up.
Hi, my name is Constantine. I am a system software engineer. I mostly do backend level work in Go and C. And I'm available as a consultant. And I think I will keep coming unless it's everything is like a lockdown or whatnot.
All right, so that's 100%. We'll keep coming. All right, so without further ado, Hal, you're up. I did notice this time around that the two Justins and the two Mikes and the two Constantines split up, no longer sit next to each other. Do you have like 3 mics or 2 mics now? Also, PSA, this thing is being live streamed, so if the FBI is looking for you, make sure you're behind it. Got everything.
I haven't turned it on.
Maybe. In the meantime, please grab some food. There's plenty. Don't shy. Oh, change the code.
Okay, there we are. All right, so I wanted to give kind of a clickbaity title, so this is it. Now, how many people have some idea of what Cursus is to begin with? Somewhat? Okay. Well, you've probably seen it before. You may not know. Hello. I think my slides got messed up while I wasn't looking. I didn't put those blanks in there. Darn it.
Are they all blank?
No. I was probably leaning on the space bar or something.
I'm about to hear some curses.
Yes. There we go. Now maybe we're back. So Cursus is a very old library, or really a set of libraries. It goes back at least to 1985, when the world was character-based, but people were already wishing they had something better. They wanted the cursor to move around the screen and be able to control it and everything. So this is what was developed back then, and it has grown, like a monster ever since then. It is still in use. If you've used like HTOP or ATOP on Linux, you've probably seen it, because that takes over your screen and responds to individual keystrokes, I think. A nice thing about Cursus apps is that they will work over an SSH session, because they're just character codes that go to your terminal and instruct it how to display. So you might find that Cursus is very complex. And there are some good reasons for this. Any software that is more than 35 years old and has grown and changed over all that time, it's going to be complex. It's going to have some barnacles on it. terminals themselves are complex. If you've never read about TermCap and TermInfo and the TIC compiler, just read that junk sometime. It'll make you feel good that you don't have to mess with that. Everybody knows the ANSI standard or knows about it. Like iTerm or whatever is ANSI compliant. It knows the ANSI colors, etc. That actually was derived from an actual physical terminal called VT100 that DEC Systems made back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. I'm not sure how far back, but that is sort of the standard nowadays. Now, around 1984, memory was very limited and processors were very slow, and we were all using C at best. So anytime you look at a library like that and you ask yourself, why is this so weird? It's probably because, well, people were operating in less than 1 meg of memory, and that's why this isn't one library, it's several libraries. You can just stick the ones in memory you want when you need them. It's why they try to cram as much functionality into one little thing as they can. It was a different time. Now, there are some inconsistent interfaces in Cursus because it evolved over time, and there are many different versions of it. Originally it was Cursus, then PD Cursus, P Cursus, N Cursus, System 5, BSD versions. I don't know. There are probably more. They're all basically the same, but all somewhat different, which is the pain of that sort of thing. I've always felt that the escape sequences that are sent to terminals are a big part of the problem, or a significant part of the problem with Cursus. For example, if you press a function key like F1 and you're pretending to be a terminal and talking to some computer at the other end, it's translated into a series of characters like escape, left bracket, and then 2 or 3 more characters. They all start with escape, right? So if a program is reading input, when it sees escape, what's it going to do?
Exit.
It has to stop and think, well, did he really type an escape character, or is that the start of like a function key sequence or something else? So then you have to worry about, well, gee, how many microseconds do I let go by while I drum my fingers and wait for a character after the escape? And that becomes something the programmer has to worry about, like what delay do I set, like how many milliseconds or whatever, and that's an actual thing you can set. And you may notice at times in a character interface when you hit escape, it's like a little bit slow to take it, a little bit slower than other characters. That's because the software is not sure if you really pressed an escape or if there are other characters coming after that. It's going to be a function key or whatever. So that always annoyed me a lot. Now, there are still issues with Unicode. Like, I find that the routines that, for example, draw boxes around a window, they work fine. But if I try to output certain characters myself, it just doesn't work. There probably is some way around that. And by the way, I'm working in Ruby, of course, and I'm interfacing with the Ruby Cursus library, which in turn interfaces with the real Cursus or Incursus or whatever it is written in C. So I'm really wrapping a wrapper, but I'm unapologetic about that because I feel like I'm adding value. Oh, and there are issues with colors. The traditional standard just has like 8 colors, I think. So that's typically what you're limited to. There are fancy ways you can allow for more, like 256 colors or whatever. I think you actually have to compile a different library in or something like that. But I'm not bothered, you know, I'm not that interested. Some of the routines in curses seem like they're kind of overloaded. Like, I feel like I would have made this, you know, 3 or 4 separate functions, but they make it one function, and you can pass in all kinds of crazy parameters. And I think part of that is, again, they were avoiding duplicating code. They wanted to conserve memory and that sort of thing, so you cram as many, you know, as many pieces of functionality into one little thing as you can. But, you know, 30-odd years later, it makes it a little harder. Now, there are what I call thin and thick wrappers. You know, I assume that's fairly intuitive. If you've ever seen any kind of library wrapped, some of them are very, very thin, like maybe the original library is written in C, but the Ruby methods all have the same names as the original C functions, and they have the same number of parameters. Now, it's a Ruby string instead of a null terminated string, that kind of thing. But basically, you're using the original library in a very direct way. I kind of hate that kind of thing. I like to Rubify everything. Ruby is like one of the 2 most advanced languages I've ever learned, and I love it. So I like to make a thick wrapper. You know, let's make use of Ruby's getters and setters. You know, the fact that it has symbols, we can use symbols instead of, you know, integers. We can pass blocks to methods. We have optional parameters, keywords parameters. So this can make it all very easy. Now, when I say super opinionated, there's an example that I tried to find and I couldn't find it. But I'm not the first person to wrap curses. And there was one wrapper that I felt was like very, very heavyweight. Like you had to initialize his environment and do everything his way. And, you know, after a couple hours, I just got bogged down trying to learn it. I'm like, no, thank you. But I always try for some kind of compromise there. Let's see. Yeah, so I'll show you some real stuff in a second. I have, in a C program that uses the traditional curses library, you might have maybe up to like 5 separate functions to initialize your environment. Mine does it all with one method call, rubytext.start. And parameters, you know, passed to it can make it behave different ways. But I picked the scenario that I wanted most often and, you know, made those the defaults. So my code always says just rubytext.start, unless I'm doing something very odd. Now, Curses has the idea of a standard screen, which is the entire text window that you're looking at. And I actually made a standard screen constant, analogous to standard out and standard error in Ruby. And so I then overrode getS, putS, print, RC, what else? Oh, P, like for inspection, those things. And also kept put character and get character, which are well known in curses. And if you're, you know, if you're using curses, you might have some previous knowledge of curses, so it helps if those are there. I also fixed it so you don't have to put an explicit exit. In C, it's possible to shoot yourself in the foot with a curses program because you can leave it in this weird mode when your program exits, and then everything is screwed up because you forgot to explicitly say, leave the curses environment. But in my code, you can call it explicitly, but it always calls itself at the end of the program, which means you may need to pause or sleep because it may just close too fast. I might come back to some of this later. I don't want to bore you too much with the details. You probably want to see some more interesting things. Here's a subset of my slides. Whoops. Yeah, if you install RubyText and then do RubyText slides, you'll get a longer version of this demo, but this 30 by, oh, it's not tall enough. I guess everybody can see that, right? Go away. How do I get rid of this stupid dictation thing?
Just drag the window to the right a little.
Is that draggable? Oh, it is. I didn't think it was. Okay, fine. Yeah, so this is a simple example of a window. See, I call RubyText.window and give it a handful of parameters. This is the number of rows, number of columns. Row and column here, that's the absolute coordinates of the upper left-hand corner. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and we're 13N from the left. Foreground yellow, background blue. If I then write to that window, notice it goes directly to the window. If I write to standard screen, it doesn't, standard screen doesn't really know there's a window there, so you can't override it. Currently, you just have to code so that doesn't happen. Now, this is the example I was looking for. Put S and print work as you would expect. The put S and print default to standard screen, except that here I'm saying window.output, and the output method just says change the default for the duration of this block. Now I can still, if I want to, write directly to standard out or standard error, but as you can see, you're totally bypassing the curses environment then, and you'll get what you deserve. Now, here is an example showing that print and put S work normally. Print doesn't give you a new line at the end, put S does. So these three statements all give you one line, just as in normal Ruby. And using P to put out an array, that works just as you would expect. Oh, an example of output, which I already told you about. Now this is, this mostly works, but it has some issues. I wanted to make the outputting of colors and text effects like boldface and underline, I wanted to make that as simple as possible. So what I'm doing is passing in special objects here. Like, I have this put-as statement that says, this is another color and yet another. But this is wrapped in the call to FX, you know, FX, get it? Yeah, whatever. So it will turn this piece of text yellow and this piece of text white, like that. And it's cumulative, which I don't think is what I meant. So I'm not sure yet if that's a feature or a bug, you know, time will tell. But notice I turn on boldface here, and I turn on underline here, but boldface is still on. So all that is sort of still up in the air. I'm not sure how that will work. Now, there's an RC print method that's row and column. One thing that always confused me about Cursus was, am I thinking in terms of X and Y coordinates or rows and columns? And it took me forever and ever to get that right. And you know, Cursus normally thinks in terms of rows and columns. So, I mean, if you're an XY thinker, then your origin would be down at the bottom of the screen, right? 0, 0. If you're a row and column person, your origin will be at the upper left. So that's the way it's usually done. RC print, notice that it says it doesn't move the cursor. What does that mean? It means that these 3 lines, it prints simplify, simplify, simplify at these specific locations, but then it immediately does another put S, and it resumes where it left off up above. So it has a concept of where the cursor was in the meantime, and RC print doesn't affect the cursor.
If you can, hold on. If you ended up printing at the same line as where a simplify went, what would happen?
You would just override it.
Okay.
There's nothing to really stop it from overriding anything.
So so in that set of, so that row and that set of columns, there's supposed to be a simplify there, but then you override what the characters that are in those columns, and now it's the other text that you've put in there. And so simplify will no longer be there.
Right.
Okay.
If you write at the same location twice, then whatever you write latest, you know, is what's really there.
Okay. Just making sure it's not like the very beginning examples where they're overlapping each other. That's not the case. It's just overlapping.
Oh, I'd have to think about what you're asking, but
I think I got it.
Yeah, this is. But yeah, if you overwrite within a window, then you're not really violating any of the rules of Cursus. You're just sort of like stepping on your own foot rather than shooting your own foot, maybe, I don't know. But like writing directly as standard out or standard error, you know, that just messes you up, you know, worse, if that makes any sense. Oh yeah, I implemented wrapping here. So if you print out something that is wider than the window, it will wrap. And by default, there is no scrolling. This example shows how you can scroll up or down. But at the current time, I'm not saving the text. So if you scroll something off the top of your window or off the bottom, it's just gone. Because that's, you know, traditionally something you as a programmer had to manage yourself. And yeah, also if you have sub-windows on the screen and you scroll standard screen, right now your other windows just go away. Yeah, and if scrolling is not turned on and you hit the bottom, it just reuses the last line over and over again. Now you can detect the size and cursor position of any window. Like standard screen is 32 by 134. The smaller window is 10 by 63. And at the time this call was made, the row and column for standard screen were 0, 0, in other words, home position. And the position for the sub-window was row 6, column 0, in other words, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, that is where the cursor was internally when we made that call. Now, I can still write to standard screen, of course, and it knows where its own cursor is. It's still at the home position. So those are maintained separately, as they should be. You can pretend that a window, including standard screen or any sub-window, pretend it's like a two-dimensional array, and you can say, oh, row 2, column 2, that's an M, that's the M right here. Row 0, column 15 is a space, it's like one of these spaces, and so on. And likewise, you can not only retrieve those, but you can set them. You can use bracket equals to stick characters directly at any place on the screen. For example, you see here, I go to a certain, I stick an X at 422 and a Y here and a Z here. Intuitive how it works. Now, this is where optional parameters and reasonable defaults start to make sense. In the first example, I explicitly say I want this window positioned at row 6, column 9. So that is the upper left-hand corner of this window. I specified both row and column. If I specify the row but no column, it will assume the column to be centered on the window. So this is in the center, left and right. If I specify column but no row, it'll put it in the specified column, but it will center it on the screen and or on the window. And when I say window, it's this entire black area here, so you can see this is in the middle. If I omit both of those parameters, it will stick it in the very center of the screen. So if I, by default, if I create a window and I give it a size but not a position, it'll go dead center. Now, some methods I've let take symbolic names instead of just integers, like things like top, right, center, bottom, that type of thing. This is not fully fleshed out. I should do more of this in different places elsewhere, but you can see it working here. I take each one of these cases and I say, well, let's grab a row, a column, and a character string, and we'll go to that row and column, stick the character there. So I put all of these here without really specifying, you know, the numeric values for the coordinates. Clear? There's home, which will go to the 0, 0 position, and put character will put a character at whatever position the cursor is. There is also up, down, left, and right, which will, you know, go in that direction. So here I start out at a certain location, and then I go, well, I put a plus sign at the first location, and then I, you know, keep going back there, but each time I go a different direction from that starting point. Up, down, left, and right, they also have their bang alternatives, which will go to the extreme edges of the screen. If you want to specify how far from where you are, you can. Like I can say, go 2 up, or 4 to the left, or 5 to the right, that kind of thing. This is an old-fashioned spinner. There are threads involved, so it takes whatever is in the block, and this is just a stupid long calculation that does several million, you know, multiplications. It happens to take like 9 seconds or so. So it'll spin while you're waiting for it to finish. You've seen these in old-fashioned contexts before, unless you're all like much younger than I think. Now this is a somewhat fancier example that shows Cursus is a lot faster than it used to be. Like there was a time when you just wouldn't dream of doing anything this stupid, because you know it would like bog down your terminal. It would just, you know, your terminal would be refreshing, the cursor would be jumping, and you would just be like, you know, getting some kind of like brain disorder while you watched it. But this is kind of acceptable. And what I've got here is.
So now we know that all of Wall Street uses curses.
Huh?
So now we know that all of Wall Street uses this. Right?
I would not be surprised. But yeah, so I'm using threads here. And if you don't know how threads work, this is kind of a decent example to spend 5 minutes looking at. Let's see. So there's that. How much time do I actually have left?
I mean, you've got an hour left if you want to fill that, but I mean, as much time as you want.
Okay. Well, I'll show you a couple other things while I'm thinking about it.
I'd love to see the actual code if you.
Yeah, I'll get to that. I'll show you some code, maybe not the whole thing with all the warts and everything. Who admits to being nerdy enough to know about John Horton Conway's Game of Life? Good for you, like half of you. This is not an actual game, it's sort of like a math experiment. You have, you know, cells on a grid, and each cell is either alive or dead. And there are very, very, very simple rules for populating this thing. Any live cell with fewer than 2 live neighbors dies, as if by underpopulation. More than 3 live neighbors, you die, like overpopulation. If you have exactly 3 live neighbors, you become alive, like reproduction. So those are all the rules there are. And you get all this wonderful stuff, you know, like this. And it turns out there are certain patterns that were discovered when we started doing this sort of thing. Like there are, you know, blocks and whatever that are stable. You know, if you apply the rules over and over again, they just don't change. Then there are these things that oscillate, like 3 live cells in a row will constantly oscillate back and forth like that. There's that more complex one, and wonderfully, complex ones like that. Yeah, and then there's a thing called a spaceship, where if you put them in a certain pattern, they will travel across the screen. And believe me, I've wasted, dozens of hours of my life that I can never get back this way. And I have no regrets. But anyway, since I have this, crude curses thing, I said, well, I'll do my own game of life. And this has bugs. It's not even in Git yet. But I'll show you how it works. We define alive as an asterisk. When I ask for a cell at a row and column, I'll say it's, I'll first of all check and see if it's within my little world, because, I have a limited screen size here. If it's not, I'll just say nil, like there's nothing there, or you can't even ask about that cell. Otherwise, I'll return a blank or an asterisk, like it's alive or it's dead. Yeah, so that's how I define alive. That row and column has the alive character in it. Neighbors, I won't bore you with all the details here. Analyze is where basically all the rules are. And if you'll notice the way I formatted my code here, if you imagine that I'm sitting on the square where my cursor is, then there will be 8 squares surrounding me, row -1, column -1, all the way down to row +1, column +1, like that. So I formatted that weird way just to keep it clear in my head. And for each one of these, for each row and column, this analyze just takes a single row and column. I ask, is this grid location, alive? If it is, I'll say, well, what neighbors, what neighbors does it have? And it's just, how many living neighbors. So if it's 0 or 1, I die of loneliness, and I add the row and column to the died list. If it's 4 through 8, it's overpopulation. Otherwise, here's the case where the cell is not alive, but it has exactly 3 neighbors, so you reproduce. And the other situation is you just leave everything alone. Okay, so here I start out at home. I think I've got a little bug of some kind. I print the generation number. I set died and born to empty arrays. I go all the way through the grid, by row and column. And yeah, I'm calling analyze there. So I'm going, for every row, for every column, analyze row column. And it doesn't directly affect the array, it just keeps, the died and born list, so that afterward I can, I can reprint the grid based on what happened in the previous generation. Now, I started out reading from a file. I said, well, that's kind of lame. So I gave us a little, editing tool that will let us put, living and dead things on the grid. Everything starts out dead. You can toggle with, space bar. So you can go up, down, left, right, put things wherever you want. Character D will set a delay. So you press D, it asks you for a delay, instead of defaulting to like 400 milliseconds, you can set it down to 0 or whatever. Let's see. Yeah, there's how set delay works. It goes to a place on the top line of the screen and asks you what delay you want, and then gets the string and sets it in that instance variable. So yeah. So then I have a loop that runs one generation after another, and it does a sleep, and assuming we're running, it runs a generation, and that's just the method we saw up above. And then it like grabs a character. Oh, I should mention that I cheat here. I'm accessing a thing called CWindow, which is the actual Cursus window, because I kept running across instances where I'm like, oh, I forgot to make a method for that. So I needed to drop down to the lowest level, go down to the thin wrapper. So every window, the @grid is my Ruby window, but under that there's a Cursus window, and it knows all the basic Cursus functions, and I can call no delay equals true. And what that does is, when you're down here and you get a character, it doesn't wait for a character. It says, has the user given me a character? And if it does, then it uses it, and if not, it just goes on. So that's why I have this case here that says nil, do nothing. If we don't hit any character, it just keeps going. Space will toggle the running, just start or stop. D, set delay. Q, quit. R, I was trying to reset the grid there, but there's a bug, it doesn't work right. Anyway, I'll show you that. You have to spell Ruby right. Yeah, so if I go here and I make one of these still life things and one of these oscillator things, and just for fun, I'll put a glider up here and one down here. I think I'm doing this right. So remember, the block would just do nothing forever because it's stable. The oscillator will switch back and forth from horizontal to vertical, and these things will tend to travel across the screen. Now, so we can see this a little bit better, I'm going to speed it up a little. Let's say 0.05 seconds. And now I'll start it. And when it hits the other things, oh, that guy went the wrong way. Yeah, when it hits the other things, it can, possibly interact with them, whatever. Yeah, this already fizzled out. A lot of things will reach a stable configuration in like a very short time. Just for fun, I'll show you a very extreme example with, you can start with just 5 things. 2, 3, 4, 5 in that special pattern. And oh yeah, let's definitely make this as fast as possible. This takes more than 1,100 generations to stabilize, believe it or not. And hello, yeah, there we go. And along the way it spawns like 6 gliders or something. But yeah, anytime you're wondering, gosh, how did life on Earth evolve? Just bear in mind that with 3 stupid rules, we could do this. And if you had like 5,000 or 6,000 rules, you might get, plants and animals and people. It all kind of makes sense. As I said, there are a million implementations of that out there. You can waste many, many hours of your life having fun. Now, do you want to look at at that piece of code, another piece of code? What?
It's interesting to see. I don't know, maybe
The actual library
like
stuff?
how you're wrapping curses, like some generic things that you're wrapping.
Well, let's see. If I I'm kind of lost here. Hold on. Yeah, there's my top level. I sometimes have a habit of putting an empty skeleton near the top of my Ruby code so that I don't necessarily have to define things. Anytime after this, if I say Ruby text : keys, it knows that that's a class and so on. That's just sort of a weird little habit of mine. Let's see. Yeah,
Like
there's
how are
nothing
you
really interesting.
defining RC, for example? How are you implementing, or how are you overriding puts, for example, like that?
One question at a time.
Well, let's see. Let's look at navigation. I mean, basically, I'm calling the thin wrapper, which is already in Ruby. Somebody already did the work of interfacing Ruby to C. I'm just making a thicker wrapper around that. But let's see where the actual thing happens. Yeah, here we are. Cursus window, call current Y and current X. Now that is something that has caused me headaches because I told you the cursus is row and column oriented. Well, it is, except when it isn't. Here they call the row the current Y value, and they call the column the current X value. And like, why are you confusing me? So I always have trouble remembering, okay, is it rows and columns or is it X and Y? And then, does it start at 0 or does it start at 1? But, it starts at 0, by the way, always. And I've tried to, sort of standardize on rows and columns here. But yeah, that instance variable C window, that's the actual cursus window. Let's see where that is. Man, I'm supposed to know my way around this thing. Confused.
I think on that 28 you're defining it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so here I'm invoking the actual thin wrapper, the curses that, I don't remember if it comes with Ruby or if it's a separate library now. But anyhow, it's out there and it's standard. But I have added stuff to try to, make it more regular, easier to use, that kind of thing. Let's see. You were asking about the output. It's pretty simple, basically. I have these functions, put s, print, p, that kind of thing, and they call delegate output with a specified symbol saying which method I'm really trying to use and the set of arguments. Then I do like little tweaks, like I'll make it an empty string if there aren't any arguments. I'll add a new line if it's put s, because put s adds a new line, etc. I handle effects, like I go through the arguments you're printing, and if argument is an effect, then I apply it. If it's not, I'm not even sure what that line does. But yeah, then I take each character of the argument and I basically do a cursus window add character, which is like basically the simplest operation to stick a character in a cursus window. Now I do kind of special case the new line because what were the issues I had? I'm manually doing some things that yeah, here we are. I have to worry about, are we scrolling? Are we on the bottom row? Blah, blah. That kind of thing. Yeah, so I'll show you one more little application. We can come back to these questions if you want. But one of the reasons I was developing this was to use in my blogging tool, which I kind of like, but it's not full featured yet, but I'll show it to you anyway. I'll go into /temp. I'm pretty sure there's not a, oh, but there is. Yeah, anyway, I wanted a kind of hybrid interface. Like, I like a text interface, like a REPL, like IRB or Pry or SQL Plus or whatever, but sometimes I want menus. So with this kind of thing, you can mix both of them. So I start the blog tool in a directory that doesn't have a repo under it, and ask if I want to create a new one. I can say yes or no like that. I'll just say yes. So then it asks, do I want to do a quick setup? I say yes. It finds 4 editors out there. I'll just do them. It asks, do I want to do a quicker initial setup? Let's say foo.com. Create my first view. A view in my paradigm is like a sub-blog. All the blogs share the same back end, but they can have different look and feel and be deployed different places. That was my whole purpose for doing this myself. So, yes, I'll do it the fast way. I'll call this view stuff and give it the title, a place for my stuff. With apologies to George Carlin. And foo.com, whatever. Okay, so I create a view, and now if I do help, everything goes to hell. Probably my window is not big enough. If I let's try that again. And obviously I got some kind of exception that was rescued when I resized the window without exiting. Yeah, so there's some help information. And there's some command line completion, like, gee, that command started with an L, what was it? L tab, and it gives you a window like that for your command line completion. Let's see, I'll show you, the view that we just generated. Preview, it looks like that. Uses SVG to make the banner up here. Has some defaults that don't really currently make sense, but maybe later on they will. The frequently asked questions are not especially interesting. Don't be stupid, I just told you I was a rabbit. Yeah, and there are these things that, oh, I see there is some like default stuff in there. But there are no blog posts, therefore there are no pinned blog posts. Oh, if you don't hit the plus, you can hit this thing, it'll take you to an actual page over here, that kind of thing. Now, if I wanted to, that's not what I wanted to hit. Yeah, another part of my, my reason for doing this was I want to make things easily configurable. I want to like describe what I'm doing in as few configuration files as I can. And this part should actually work. If instead of typing a command, I hit spacebar, it should give me a menu up here. And if I then go over to config and say, I want to change my layout, then what I can do is say, I want to put the recent posts after the sidebar. In other words, put the sidebar on the left. And I want to put the pinned posts at the bottom here. So I'll rebuild. And there's some nice little debug printouts. Sorry about that. And then if I do preview again, now my sidebar is on the left and the pinned posts are on the bottom. So yeah, I started messing with curses just as a way of giving myself a hybrid interface. I can type in a REPL when I want to, and I can throw up menus when I want to. Okay, questions about anything?
He's got 14% battery, so.
Thank you for noticing.
Can you set it up so that when it resizes, it accounts for that? Like an interactive header for your terminal?
There probably is a way. I don't know it yet.
Redraw
Like,
everything?
huh?
Redraw everything?
But I might have to like detect that it happened in order to redraw. And I'm not sure how to do that. But I've found out in the course of looking at this stuff that curses is way more powerful than I ever realized it was. There's even a thing called a pad, which is a virtual window that can be larger than your screen. So you can imagine that your physical screen or your window is like a little window looking on some like much larger thing. You can see using it for text-based games or something, except nobody really does that anymore. But yeah, as much junk as I've just shown you, this is like less than 5% of the functionality of curses. Anything else? I still have battery. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Hal. food, did you have some? Otherwise, Mingle Talk Network. And if you wanna, I will not go today, but if you wanna come have a drink, see if coming out across the street, people usually go there and mingle. I haven't done it, I have to go walk. And, see you next time. Got something? See you next time. All right. Oh, and please help us clean up. Okay, thank you.
More handshaking.
I try not to use the door.
Really full time?
I don't like using
Do a lot of walking there? That's not how they do it.
Some of our national talent.
Yeah, I started when I was like a top there was some library that was just for some reason, this did like people, I forgot what it was based on. I didn't really, it's really cool. Just one's done like great, great stuff.
Thank you.